fear is a disease. And if you're afraid of everything that goes on in your professional career, you're going to be afraid of, end up being afraid of going to the grocery store. You just have to moderate the risk and do the best you can. And you got to take chances. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and try something you think you might not be good at.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people who were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we have Frank Pishler. Take it away, Bill.
Hi, Frank. Well, thanks for being on the Road Less Traveled Show.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, can you tell us a little bit about your background, what your initial career was, and how long you were in that line of work?
Sure. I started out in 1989 as on the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, as a runner, basically, which is how everybody starts out, really. And did that for a while, then obviously moved up to what's called the tops clerk, which is basically you standing in front of a printer and tickets come up, and then you just use hand signals to put them in the pit. And then from there, became a manager of a desk, and then eventually found my way into the pit, became a member, and became a currency trader back when there was currency to trade. No Forex back then, not unless you were a bank anyway.
Right, excellent. And how long were you in that job? So
till 98. 98 is when I left, and kind of a good story about that. I was actually doing my checkouts for the day. It's about 2:00 in the afternoon. I looked up at the board, and I saw that 10,000 of the daily volume was done electronically, and I said, "I think that's it, fellas. I think this is going the way of the dodo, and that computer is going to take over."
All right. Yeah. Well, then after that, when you had that realization, what path did you transition to next?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. It's crazy to think about, but when you're a floor trader, you're not really trained to do a whole lot of the stuff. Office work is not something you're used to. So I just decided to stay in the same vein in trading. I went to a clearinghouse called Refco, and I worked on the back end as a broker in the brokerage side, and started dealing initially with retail investors, and then went on to move on to institutional investors, which basically was a great career, and thought that would never end too, just like the floor. And then Refco became the fourth largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. So had to rethink from there. And so there's actually been several transitions in my career. Then I went ahead and decided that I was going to be controlling my own future and not leave it up to a firm anymore. And started a hedge fund, which eventually grew to 4 hedge funds, and then eventually sold those.
Oh, that's great. Interesting. Yeah.
All right, good. Well, Frank, so back in your trading days and your running days, besides wearing out shoes, is there anything humorous that happened to you along the way?
Well, many things. Although I don't know if our audience is probably ready for a lot of them, but it's funny because I was thinking about it. I always like to add some humor into these types of things, and so I was throwing some of the anecdotes by my wife last night, and she kept saying, "No, not that one.
Keep it PG."
No. So I guess one that I wanted to share was we were standing in the pits, and it was a rollover day, so there was a lot of action happening and a lot of craziness and a lot of noise and scuttlebutt and that kind of thing. But all of a sudden, everything went quiet. So we all kind of looked up, and right then we saw coming down the main drag of the floor was the president of the Mercantile Exchange and 2 FBI agents, which, if you've ever known a floor trader, you show an FBI agent to them and they immediately become very quiet. They look down, they start pretending like they're busy. And at any rate, the FBI agents and the president of the Merc came right over to our pit. So everybody's really nervous now. And they just basically grabbed a guy by the collar, pulled him off the floor, put him in handcuffs, and marched him right off the floor. Nobody said a word. And it was very, very quiet. And like I said, it was rollover. So it was really loud right before then. And it was just dead silent. And all of a sudden, this guy next to me nudges me and goes, "Hey, when they say don't make a federal case out of it, that's what they're talking about."
Wow. Did that guy wind up being prosecuted for something?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy. That's
so what he was doing was called bucketing trades. So what he would do is he would have losers, and he wouldn't report them. And then he would try to gain them back. And he was just basically buried in his clearing firm. And so they finally had enough of that and snatched him.
Wow.
Well, we usually ask Frank, what was a deciding factor that got you to change your career? But you kind of said after the fourth largest bankruptcy, that was kind of I'm sure helped move it along. But what helped you decide to go instead of looking for employment somewhere else to kind of branch out on your own?
So it's funny. When I sold my last fund, I was sitting on the couch and my wife came up and she said, "So what do you think you're going to do now?" And I said, "Shoot, you're looking at it." And she said, "No."
That was the deciding factor.
So I was forced to find something, and I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine about, what do we do next, kind of thing. And he said that he was working for a large real estate fund out of Tokyo called the Shibuya Fund. And so he had an opportunity with them, and it was in real estate. And so he and I got together and we created this kind of secondary market for deals that Shibuya couldn't take down, and kind of matched them up with some hedge fund contacts we had. And I realized that that's the closest thing to trading that I was going to get to, right? I mean, it had the steam, hustle and bustle, and the wheeling and dealing. I really enjoy it. And so we pursued that for a while, and it was great. Except, when you're doing something kind of piecemeal like that, it's hard to always find the connections, right? A fund could be looking for an office building and all you have is apartments. Or they're looking for industrial and all you have is office buildings. You know what I mean? So we'd be busy for like 8 months and then we wouldn't do anything for 6 or 7, So it was just kind of piecemeal. So I knew that I wasn't ready to hang up the shoes, as the wrestlers say. And so I decided to search out another real estate firm that I thought I could help and get involved with and stay, active and in the business and still have some kind of financial component to keep me interested.
All right. Yeah.
Good. So, Frank, as you shifted from early trading and then later to your own funds, and then obviously going to work for some real estate firms, what kind of role did you play, and what were there some obstacles you encountered along the way in terms of some of the changing?
Yeah, so I think the biggest hurdle for me was, when you're especially a floor trader, you're really immersed in trading, right? That is your life. I mean, you're not a half, part-time kind of guy. And so traders always believe that you only trade what you know, right? So as a currency trader, I would never walk into the live cattle pit and start trading option spreads. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And real estate was like that for us as financial traders and futures traders. We didn't know anything about it and we weren't trying to learn, right? We were just going to stick to what we knew. And if I was going to have to trade off the floor, then I was going to trade what I always knew. And then when I started getting into real estate and I saw the advantages of passive income and I saw the advantage of commercial real estate, that's when I really started to understand why people get into it. And that's what, I guess, the learning curve was the hardest, right? Because you got to teach yourself not to have those prejudices of, I'm not going to trade real estate. I'm going to only trade currencies or futures or commodities or whatever it is. So getting through that and learning all the different trade terms and all the different nuances to the finance side of it, of the underwriting side, and what is NOI, and what are cap rates and how are they calculated and what do they matter, and how much is pricing and how do you find comps and all that kind of stuff. So that was a real challenge. I mean, it was like learning a whole new industry, even though I had a deep background in finance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. I mean, I can remember when I was coming out of grad school, I had an MBA in finance, and I went to interview with a firm, and they said to me, "So why do you want to be here? What are you looking to do?" And I said to them, I'm coming out of my grad program. I want to take all this great knowledge I have and put it to good use and all this other kind of stuff. I just made up some BS answer. And there was just like a VP for the office. This particular lady looked across the desk and said to me, "No, you want to make money." I was like, "Oh, well, I completely blew that interview. So I move on to the next one." But yeah. So.
It's funny you say that, because in every interview I've ever been in since the trading floor, every time somebody asks me that question, the first thing I think of is to say, because I want to make money.
Yeah.
But I always know I'm afraid to say it because I'm thinking maybe that sounds too traderish, right? You don't want to say that.
Right. Right.
But that's another thing, making the transition from the floor was difficult too, because when you get jobs on the floor, when you start there, it's a family, right? Everybody knows everybody. Mm-hmm. And no matter where I go, if I'm in an airport in Singapore or Dallas or wherever, or at a baseball game in Chicago, you say CME and everybody's like, "Oh, do you know a guy named?" And it's like, well, there was like 10,000 dudes down there, man. I probably met him, but I don't really know him. But Point is that it's like a family. So you never really get an interview, you never have a resume. Some guy tells a friend of his about you and he says, you want a job? And we say, yes. And he says, how much? And we tell him, and then that's it, right? Mm-hmm. So one day you work for this guy, the next day you're working for somebody else and nobody thinks anything about it. Mm-hmm. So getting into the real world and having to come up with a resume, go to interviews and talk office talk was a huge change for me. And I think for everybody that's ever been on the floor, it's a whole different world. The office world and the trading floor is completely different.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, and I could certainly understand that would definitely be a big transition, to what you're doing now. And again, maybe talk a bit about what you're doing now in terms of some of the role at where you're applying your skills and your knowledge and your finance background today.
Yeah. So clearly work for Park Capital Partners, which is a great firm. Love those guys. What my role is director of investor relations, which I've had at other firms too. Basically gives me a forward-facing role to talk to investors directly, not only about how we can help them diversify their portfolio, but also give them the advantages of commercial real estate syndication. Like I was telling you earlier, from my experience, I didn't know real estate, so I wasn't going to trade real estate. And I think a lot of investors are either intimidated by it, they're not educated on it. It's strange that something as complicated as options trading, there's more tools and more information out there than there is about syndication in real estate, right? And about the advantages of it. And so that's one of the things I enjoy the most is bringing that knowledge to these folks and kind of comparing my past history with my current one, and helping them understand how the distributions work, talk to them about different tax implications that they can enjoy or be wary of, and working with their money managers and their professionals in their life to help them understand. And I just think it's a really rewarding role because we're not only helping the investors, we're helping our own firm, of course, but we're also helping the seller of the property, right? There could be a million reasons why they're trying to get out of it. And if they're just trying to, start the next chapter in life, absolutely great for them. If they're in trouble, they need to get out of it for some reason or another, that's why we're here to help. And our investors can benefit from that. And that's why I really enjoy it.
Okay. Got it. So education of it's a big part of your role then in terms of helping work with the investors and educate them about some of the reasons that they might want to be part of a deal. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in this role, I think I've said it before that the three main things that you got to really put in the forefront are communication, education, and transparency, right? So we need to educate the investor. We need to continue to communicate with the investor, make sure they understand what's going on currently with the properties and as they progress, and obviously any new properties, and then remain transparent about whatever risks are involved or whatever, potholes might be in the future. There's all kinds of stuff going on in the world today that can affect the markets, not only stock and bond markets, but also real estate markets. And to give them the kind of forward, think 5 steps ahead in the chess game kind of view of it, we want to make sure they're aware of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Frank, as you transitioned out of the more financial options and the pit trading into real estate backed or genre, what was kind of one of your first victories you can recall that you realized you made the right decision and glad you put the effort into it?
Yeah, it was kind of a rather be lucky than good kind of situation, to be honest with you. We were, like I was telling you, my friend and I had created that secondary market, and the Shibuya Fund kicked this one deal out, and we ended up getting placed in the hands of a hedge fund. It was like an $80 million deal, and did it in like 2 weeks. So
wow.
And that was like, I thought, this is easy. It's kind of like how you feel when you make that really good golf shot on the first tee, and then you come up to your second shot and completely whiff it. That was that euphoria from the first hit in the cart on the way to the second shot. That was what I was feeling like.
Yeah. Years ago, I had an occasion. I was a young guy in a firm I used to work for, and I was asked by the partner to go play golf that day. I'm like, sweet. Well, I was the fourth to make 4, so that's fine. But I was still happy to go. And I was playing with my dad's old clubs. I didn't even have clubs, and I was pretty much a hacker. But anyway, the first hole was a par 4. I parred the hole. Second hole was a par 3. I parred the hole. Third hole was a par 4. I parred the hole. And then he said, "Oh, so you're going to put money on the next hole?" So listen, my game's going to go right down the drain. So just and sure enough, it did. So.
Yeah, that's a pretty good run, though. That's better than I.
Yeah, I was very pleased about that. But again, it my real game showed up after that. So yeah.
I take lessons in when I first started with my pro. He looked at my bag and he said, "Man, these clubs are older than me, and I'm older than you." I was like, "Hey, that's not nice, and I'm paying you, man." Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So Frank, in your new path, that off the floor and into the real estate world and whatnot, is there a funny story you can share? Something that you've encountered along the way?
So this is another one I tossed by the wife last night. I wanted to make sure I had some good stories, but I think it's kind of a great story and a funny story all at the same time. So prior employer was working in the medical office building space, and we were doing one-off property transactions, and basically we'd buy these at triple net lease, kind of 5-year hold, that kind of thing. And I had no idea about the database. I didn't know anything about the customers. I had called them and introduced myself, but I had never had a conversation. And so it comes time, our first equity raise comes up, and we're supposed to raise 1.9.2 million or 1.92 million. And I said, all right. And so the first name on my list comes up, and I make the phone call, and the guy's very cool and he's very nice, and he's done business with us before, so he knew the story. And I go through my spiel, and I said, he said, "Well, how much are you looking to raise?" I said, "Well, I just started the raise today, and we're at 1.92. We're trying to raise. Like, I could take that down myself." And I was like, I think I'm in the right place. I called the right guy.
Yeah.
And so I was all excited. I hung up the phone and I told my boss, I said, "Yeah, we're good. Such and such just took all 1.92. And he's like, no. We can't just give it to one guy. We got to spread it down a little bit. I said, "Oh, okay." I got excited. I was like, "Well, we're good."
That's right.
Touchdown.
It's easy.
Again, this is easy. I don't know why everybody's not doing this.
That's right. Well, excellent. Well, Frank, where are you today on your journey, on your career path? I mean, we obviously, from our background, we know where you're at, but how do you kind of envision building out that role and what you want to bring?
Well, what I'd really like to do, obviously, and we've talked about this a little bit, is just, completely explode the investor base, right? Make it so big that I can't handle it by myself. Build out the investor relations side of it, and get some people underneath us that can increase not only where we get it to, but obviously beyond that. And then pretty much let you guys buy a boat, go relax, and leave the keys in the steering wheel in my hand. No, but on a serious note, though, I think I've found my forever home, and I'm excited about the future. And I think that one of the reasons I chose to come here rather than a larger firm, which probably would have been more my style because I'm more of a corporate past, that kind of thing, is because I see the potential, right? And being in on the ground floor is better than ever being, at the top end of something. And I've been to that barbecue before, and certainly that's a far fall. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. It keeps me engaged, being with a firm that's growing, and especially you guys have done so much to get where you are already. That the future is just going to be so much more explosive and exciting. I wanted to be part of something like that. So I think that's where I see my future really is expanding and making this too big to handle. I guess is the best way to handle it, or say it rather.
As you know, quite a few things in the works. We're not quite ready to announce on this podcast, but within a month.
Yep.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
But I'll be listen, I'm chomping at the bit to let everybody know. So hopefully we got some good news to tell everybody soon.
Excellent. So Frank, again, you enjoy what you do. But at the same point in time, you obviously have a personal life and you enjoy spending time with your wife. And, how do you keep that balance between, work and, just being able to keep some personal time?
So it's been a struggle, obviously. The trading side of it, my wife and I have been together quite some time, right? So she was around during the trading days. And basically, the truth of the matter is she basically said that you need to make space for us, right? Because you can't because when I was coming up in the trading business, it turned global, right? So I would have these buzzers going off and monitors turning on in the bedroom and all that kind of stuff at 2 a.m. when Tokyo would go nutty. And she said that it's crazy. You never stop. And you learn because she's basically giving you an ultimatum, right? You either learn to fit into your life or money's going to be your only friend. And that's a lonely place to be. So it's taken me a long time, but I think what I've learned is doing things together. Like, I mentioned golfing earlier. That's how we started on that golf journey. We did it together. And so when we go, whenever we go golfing, we usually go together. And then, a lot of the volunteering we do at animal shelters, things like that, we do that together.
Mhm.
And so we just make sure that we carve out time for one another because, I'm sure you guys know that it can get busy. And if
Yeah.
you're not paying attention, time slips away. And so I just turned 50 and I'm like, whoa. I was like Mickey
Yeah.
Mantle. I never thought I'd see 26 and all of a sudden 50 popped up. I said, oh, I got to start paying attention. So
Yeah, but that's well said, Frank. I mean, again, you definitely have to, work hard, but at the same point in time, you have to kind of be able to turn it off. Turn it off to be able to spend time with family, friends, and whatever some other outside interest to just to keep a balance. And it's great you've been able to figure out how to do that. So
yeah, it's funny. My wife said one time I was saying, well, the markets are going on, whether I'm asleep or not. And she's like, but if you're not in the market, if you don't have a position, can you lose money? And I said, no. And she said, then don't have a position. And I said,
Mhm.
it's not a bad point, I guess. I can see that.
Yeah.
See the logic there.
Yeah.
Well, excellent, Frank. Well, is there something you've implemented recently in business to help you kind of grow where you're trying to go, or the CRM or any other strategies you've implemented?
So I think that without giving away too much about what's going on in the future, I think what's important to say is that I'm always looking for the next thing that can help us increase not only our database, but our opportunities and our success, right? So I'm always taking phone calls from this guy or that software company or this, whatever it is, right? I'm always listening. And, there's a lot of bad ideas out there and I waste a lot of time listening to them, but you have to listen to the bad ones to hear the good ones, right? Because how can I know just from their email, right? So
Right.
I guess the best way to say it is I just always keep my ears open and I keep a very open mind. I don't, I've always said that if I knew everything, I wouldn't need anybody else. And that just isn't the case. So
Mhm.
I keep my ears open and my mind open and I listen. And if it's a good idea, I bring it to whoever's in front of me. And if they like it, great. If not, I understand. I don't have any pride about somebody else's idea, right? I don't try to steal it. So because in case it is bad.
That's right. Hedge your bets on that.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, good. So Frank, what advice would you give somebody who's considering making a path change?
So I thought a lot about, I've had this conversation with a lot of people that have worked for me in the past, and I always say the same thing. There's a quote that says, logical consequences are the scarecrows of fools and the beacons of wise men. And I think that fear is a disease. And if you're afraid of everything that goes on in your professional career, you're going to be afraid of, end up being afraid of going to the grocery store. You just have to moderate the risk and do the best you can. And you got to take chances. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and try something you think you might not be good at. If I hadn't have done that, I would never, when you walk on the floor the first time and you're at your first interview as a runner, which is the easiest job on two planets. I mean, basically you hand you a piece of paper and you hand it to another guy. That's it. And there's not a lot of chance to screw that up. But when you're down there, it seems a lot more intimidating than that. And then the market opens up and you hear all the people screaming and yelling. You're thinking, there is no way I'm going to figure this out. And if you quit right then, you'll never have the chance to see and do all the things that I've done. And certainly, how you guys created your own business, I mean, think about all the things you would have missed out on had you not started Park Capital Partners, or got into real estate for that matter.
Right.
So that's really the message. Weigh the consequences and make your risk assessment and then move, right?
Mhm.
And don't hesitate. You got to move quickly and confidently and then just take your chances and be prepared for the successes and the defeats and treat them equally. You don't need to jump up and down when you win, and you don't need to be all sad when you lose. It's part of the game.
Yeah. Robert Kiyosaki talks about one of the most important things is to learn to manage risk. And there's risk in everything, but at the same point in time, learn to manage it and don't let it control you. Don't let it paralyze you. Don't get fear to the point of where you don't move forward. You have to take chances in life, and you manage that risk, and then you apply your knowledge and carry forward. So.
Yeah, my wife laughs at me. We'll be put in a situation, could be anything, right? Could be buying a house, selling a house, or whatever it is, buying a car, whatever. And she'll just see me get quiet for a second, and I'll say, "Here's what we're going to do." And she just knows that I just had that risk assessment happen in my head.
Right.
I just said, "I've already decided where we're going with this, and here's how it's going to happen." And so, and another thing is, don't be afraid to walk away, right? If something, like I was saying earlier, there's some bad ideas, right? And if somebody poses a bad idea to you, just because they're a friend of yours or in your networking group or whatever, you don't need to feel obligated to take part in that bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Bad idea, it's a bad one. That's it.
Right. I remember Sam Zell, I think in his last book, Am I Being Too Subtle, mentioned that same thing on risk mitigation, that said, he always looks at the downside risk. And if he can solve for that, the upside takes care of itself.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll still be in the game. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things that I really appreciate about my time on the floor, is that it really taught you to assess risk and assess the situation you're in very, very quickly, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't have a lot of time to react, because everybody, it's a foot race, right? And so if you're late to the game, you don't get to eat. And so you gotta teach your mind to work like that, right? And so I think that's one of the things I've been best served by with my time down there.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, what's one of the best ways for the listeners to be able to reach you?
So obviously, you go to our website at parkcapitalpartnersllc.com, and I'm part of the Meet Our Team website. My information's there. My email, my phone number is all listed there. I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. And you know what? I just like talking about real estate and the markets in general. So if you just want to have a chit chat about something, learn more about what we're doing, about what's going on, I'm happy to be there and have a chat. Great. Well, Frank, we really appreciate you being on the Road Less Traveled show today. Enjoyed the insight and your feedback on everything, and we wish you continued success. Well, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you giving me the time. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Frank, really appreciate you being on. We'd also like to thank our listeners for tuning in. Please continue to listen. Give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great content, like listening to Frank Pishler today. We're so thankful to our sponsors, including Park Capital Partners, that helps make this program possible. So Ken, please continue to listen in. And remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.